Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of the 2022 Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit. My name is Nicole Tirico. I'm a program director at the Intentional Endowments Network. And following our land acknowledgement statement at the opening of the summit, before we start this session, I'd like to again recognize the longstanding history of colonialism that has brought us to reside on Indigenous lands and reflect on our place within that history. We're sharing the link to our land acknowledgement resource page in the chat so you can learn more about our journey and the actions we're taking to meaningfully support Indigenous communities across our organizations. And we invite you to also visit the link in the chat to share any feedback or resources you have with us as we continue on this journey. With that in mind, I acknowledge that I'm joining you all today from Western Massachusetts, the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, who are the Indigenous people of this land. And I invite the speakers of this session, as well as our participants, to, as you introduce yourselves, kindly state the lands you're calling in from. So with that, I will hand it over to Lisa to introduce this topic and panel.
There we go. Thank you so much, Nicole. I am here in DC on Anacostan land. And we're here to talk about financial advisors and why they are critical to asset owners who want to move to impact. The two case studies that we're going to hear from today beautifully illustrate this fact. Working with the right investment firm and making your intentions clear makes the difference. Many investors, foundations, and endowments say that the main challenge to increasing their allocation is difficult sourcing credible investment advice. And the depth of direct impact investing knowledge and experience is the most important quality when selecting an advisor. Those stats and my involvement with Divest Invest campaigns led me to create Values Advisor, a nonprofit fiscally sponsored by RSF Social Finance designed to help individuals, foundations, and endowments find the advisor that truly fits their needs. And Intentional Endowments has partnered with us to make the platform available to its members as a resource, and you'll be hearing more in upcoming weeks. Today, I have the pleasure of showcasing these two case studies and the work of their financial advisors. University of New Hampshire and Prime Buchholz are first, followed by Virginia Wesleyan and Brown Advisory. In the interest of time, I'm going to let them do their own introductions and hand it over now to Eric Gross to kick off the UNH story. Eric, it's all yours. And I suggest all of us take off turn on our videos and on our microphones. It seems to be turning us off in the transition. So as Eric gets going here, and we're going to have, along with Eric, we're going to have Kate Dumas, who is with Prime Buchholz, and the story of, I'm interested in, here we go. Here comes Eric, here comes Kate. Yay. Eric, you're still muted. There we go.
There we go. Wow. Clicking those buttons, trying to get off mute. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. My name is Eric Gross. I'm the treasurer at the UNH Foundation in Durham, New Hampshire. I'm acknowledging that we are resident on the ancestral homelands of the Pennacook, the Abenaki, and the Wabanaki peoples. I'm really happy to be here today, and along with Kate Dumas, who's also just down the road. She's also on the lands of the Pennacook, Abenaki, and Wabanaki peoples. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the UNH story. I'm just going to bring up very quickly a single slide for you all to see, just a quick overview of UNH. As we start here, UNH is about 156 years old. I don't know where that slide is. And now I've lost my video.
Well, we want to hear from you anyway, Eric.
All right, so I'm just going to go. So UNH is about 156 years old. We've been located in Durham, New Hampshire for about 130 years. And we are a Land, Sea, and Space grant, an R1 research institution. We have 14,000 students, about 80% of those are undergrad students. We are very proud to have the oldest endowed sustainability program in the country for a higher education institution. UNH is a STARS Platinum institution. We've been at that level since 2017. We have a roughly $500 million endowment supporting scholarships and programs, et cetera, across UNH. And we've had an ESG program in place since about 2015. Just briefly, I'll run through a little bit of the history of our UNH story. In 2011, roughly in 2011, we started having conversations, student, faculty, staff, administrators, the university president, the board, the investment committee, advisors, started down this multi-year conversation about sustainable investing, ESG, divestment, all of the above. Very helpful to understand the culture and the various perspectives at UNH. And it turns out that in 2014, our foundation board approved the creation of an ESG pool. In 2015,
Eric, we lost you. Kate, you are muted. Can you make sure that you're unmuted? There we go. Wait, here he comes.
There's Eric.
I don't hear him though.
No, Eric, we can't hear you. Oh, it's unfortunate. I can tell he's telling a great story about sustainability at UNH. Let's see if we can flag.
Kate, while he recovers his do you want to just start a little bit on telling, when you came in and to partner with Eric on this and your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were very fortunate in that we had started our work with the University of New Hampshire right around 2008. And that was a period of time where internally at our firm, we were seeing a really interesting transition from historically what had been kind of screened portfolios. So thinking back to the outset of Prime Buckholz in 1988, where we had clients who were dealing with, apartheid, wanting to think about the McBride principles, religious institutions with screens, really right around the time we started working with the University of New Hampshire, we had found that some clients were really interested in kind of more of an approach that was about mission alignment. And so really in the case of University of New Hampshire, for example, there is a huge sustainability and environmental bent to everything on campus. And so we really started some of that work around, how do we really truly align the portfolio to some of the things that are most important to the institution. And we were extremely lucky. Eric was touching on kind of the variety of perspectives and conversations that were happening. We were really at the table with a variety of stakeholders. And so I think as we were evolving to what ultimately became kind of an ESG carve-out portfolio, we had a lot of feedback from different stakeholders, whether it was faculty or students, the investment committee. And I think that was truly important, as, potentially overwhelming as that could have been, to really kind of bring everyone to the table. Eric's given me a note that he can't hear me, which is unfortunate. But that allowed us to really work alongside of UNH. And so when they established their carve-out portfolio, we felt like we had a suite of investments that we had already done a tremendous amount of work with, had put into some other client portfolios that really fit their mandate. And then subsequently, when the University of New Hampshire was exploring becoming a PRI signatory, we had already been a signatory for a couple of years. We're able to step in and provide kind of support and encouragement there. And then ultimately, Eric will talk about bringing the entirety of those two portfolios together, that main endowment and the sustainable endowment. And there it was really interesting. We had put together ESG scoring across all of our recommended managers with the idea that we were seeing a real mainstreaming happening, probably about 5-6 years ago in terms of integration, gave us an ability to start comparing kind of what were known then as kind of traditional asset managers versus those that were more sustainable. And that gave us a lens with which we could start to combine the UNH portfolios while really trying to maintain the spirit of kind of that mission alignment.
Kate, say again when you started working with them, and then how many years before the carve out for the sustainable, and then how many years before you combined the two?
Yeah, so the timeline is really interesting. A lot of these conversations really started in 2007 and 2008. The carve out portfolio, about 2015, I believe. So a number of years after that. And then I think we combined the two portfolios again last year. And I think, it's interesting because I can really tie it back to the evolution of kind of the firm, but also what we were seeing in industry in terms of the opportunity set. And I think, it was very much aligned with what we saw as a mainstreaming of ESG across the industry.
And what are the things that stand in the way of a committee or the leads on who make the decision makers of their intention of what they want to do, and then their ability to actually implement?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's interesting. Ahead of this, I was looking at the Nakubo study, and a lot of the things that are cited there, whether you think about cost, and that cost can be explicit in terms of implementation. It also can be looking at the resources available to the institution. Oftentimes you're talking about performance and thinking about things with a fiduciary lens. I think as we've evolved with ESG, we've actually started to see a re-rating of companies as they improve their ESG scores. And so it's been nice to kind of be able to go back and say, we're not necessarily talking about an additional cost in any of those ways. I think, I used the word overwhelm earlier. I think oftentimes this can feel like a really big undertaking, just to articulate the mission of the University of New Hampshire in a way that made sense to all of the stakeholders, and then translate that into something that was investable. It took an iteration, and I love the question that you just asked about time, because it did take many years for us to kind of get to the right place. That said, I think each step of the way, it was important to kind of put down a flag and, track where we were, engage with everyone, make sure we were all aligned all along the way in order to make sure that we were creating something that was sustainable, but also to address some of that overwhelm.
And so the world has changed from 2007 and do you have clients now, or can you imagine, let's say you were starting with UNH this year, do you see the ability to accelerate, because so that we, that an endowment does not have to wait 15 years to move to where you are now?
Yeah, no, I think a huge amount of proof of concept, a huge amount of additional opportunities in the space in terms of firms coming forward with their approaches. I think that kind of allows us to move further along the line. But more importantly, I think it's become such a part of the overall conversation. You look at colleges and universities, the topics of climate are part and parcel of the education. It's part and parcel of plant and operations. It's part and parcel of education. If we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, these are holistic conversations. And so even just that step of articulating and recognizing the benefits of, bringing these elements into the portfolio, I think are just so much more commonly, part of our lexicon.
I'll ask you one more question, and then I think we'll move to the next two so that we have more time at the end in case Eric comes back with us. So just as a last question, what would you, oh, here he comes, maybe.
Great.
Are you with us, Eric?
I think so. Sorry about that.
No worries. So Kate is just, talked about the timeline that you all were on, and a little bit about how she does believe that today that timeline could be much more shortened. So I'll turn it over to you to fill in where you were leaving off and take it from there.
Oh, well, I don't want to take up time from our other presenters at Virginia Wesleyan. I'm sorry I was unable to be there. So I guess, I guess I'll just point out, and I know this was one of the follow-up questions, was some of the critical factors, certainly having Prime in place, such a great, committed, and collaborative partner, really responsive, very honest and forthright, always willing to speak very clearly to our board and the investment committee. But we had we've had a couple wonderful champions along the way. Our experience over the last 12 years, we had a college president who was instrumental at a couple key junctures along the way, some number of years ago with our university community and our board at certain key decision-making points. And then we also had a donor who was really well placed on our board and our investment committee, and that was great. He really put his money where his mouth was, and was very helpful in moving the whole conversation along. And then just finally, the other key element we had was having the STARS process every 3 or 4 years really focus, several parts of our organization on, how we can actually make things work in a very actionable way.
What is the STARS process, Eric?
So STARS is the Sustainable Tracking and Assessment program that ASHE runs. And it's an across-the-board sustainability assessment for the entire university. Investments is just a small piece of the total, but there are certain key elements within investments per se that allowed us to sort of focus our process of moving sustainable investing forward. That was really critical.
And could you all talk a little bit about what's in the future for you? What do you see as the next hurdle or next steps or next ideal that you want to achieve in terms of this impact journey?
Yeah, I think at this point, we're really we're wrapping up some changes to our investment policy statement to really reflect very accurately our board and our investment committees and our university's thoughts about sustainable investing. And we're also, continuing to work with Prime to sort of systematize the process of evaluating fund managers across the ESG and the DEI spectrum, and really understanding how to make that sort of just, very clear process day in and day out when we review our investments, just right alongside financial returns. And then finally, I would say, we want to really grow our understanding of what net zero means to investments. That's a, very rapidly changing and evolving space. And so we would like to be part of that process and hopefully contribute.
And how have the human resources, besides prime book holds, but the internal human resources that you've needed, how changed over the past, let's say, decade as this has become more important for you?
Yeah, I think one of the key elements is the addition of the Committee on Investor Responsibility, really adding in voices in a very formalized way to the conversation across the university. Students, faculty, alums, staff, people who are really passionate about sustainability and passionate about how it might activate itself within the investments. So having that collective brain power, and everybody brings different, different experiences and different levels of knowledge and different perspectives. And so having all those perspectives at the table to inform the conversation, to really grow, our collective understanding on what it might mean to have sustainable investing at UNH. So that's been, I would say, critical. Certainly myself along the way, I've learned a lot. So I've really, been able to bring more and more each year to the table myself, and to try to just help facilitate the conversation across all of our constituents. And we have a great investment committee too that is really dedicated to this topic.
Without getting too granular, but like what percentage is where you want it to be, and what percentage is still you want to improve on?
You mean within the endowment itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say our percentage is roughly 50-50 at this point. 50 that we view as what we call ESG qualified. The other 50% is of course you don't start just with a blank slate to make a sustainable investing portfolio, right? You're starting from where you are, and where we were, a decade ago was, basically zero, as it were, right? So we're well along towards increasing that, and we want to increase that ever more going forward. Will we ever achieve 100%? I don't know, but I think the process of and the thought of increasing that over time, really, we'd like to do that. We don't have any specific targets at this point. I think we're, one of the keys is we're just trying to be flexible and take in all the information, and try to just, as a collective body, figure out how and when it makes sense to focus on building our sustainable investing portfolio.
Excellent. Yeah. And so I'm seeing there's a something in the chat, a good question in the chat. There's one we're gonna please enter. When you say net zero, I wonder if next year at the summit we will have a really robust conversation on what we've figured out that means.
No, right? Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think it's it's probably changing month by month, and the ability to actually implement a net zero portfolio will be much more well known than it is right now.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so back in the background there, I think let's go ahead and move to Scott Miller and Allie Baylor for their presentation. And then
Terrific. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Scott Miller, president of Virginia Wesleyan University, along with Allie Baylor of Brown Advisory, and we're joining you from beautiful, sunshiny southeastern Virginia. And we acknowledge that this is the native land of the Chesapeake Indigenous Tribe. I first got involved with what was then the American College and University President's Climate Commitment in 2006. The original group formulated the plan, and 50 additional presidents joined them in Washington, D.C. for the first meeting. I was in my second presidency at the time, and through active involvement down through the years, I've gained momentum that's led me to my career capstone environmental experience at Virginia Wesleyan University in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Incidentally, I'm uniquely positioned as the only president in the country to have presided over 3 signatory institutions since the founding of this group. In 2015, when I joined Virginia Wesleyan, I was inspired by the university's location and commitment to the principles espoused by Second Nature and the Climate Leadership Network. I moved to Virginia Beach to lead an institution that proudly proclaims all environmental issues as relevant to its mission and purpose. In 2015, the year of my arrival, a donor made a commitment to fund a world-class center for environmental sciences. The following year, 2016, she committed initial funding to start an honors college with a primary focus on environmental issues. In 2018, we became one of the early members of the Intentional Endowments Network. In 2019, with the guidance from our friends at Allegheny College in Pennsylvania, Virginia Wesleyan established its version of the environmental guiding principles. As we all know, presidents change, deans change, boards change. The environmental guiding principles are embedded in all policy and operational activities and withstand the test of time. I mentioned a gift in 2015 to construct a world-class environmental sciences center. The center is 44,000 square feet and features sophisticated indoor and outdoor learning spaces that embody science on display and promote hands-on experiences, interactive learning, and interdisciplinary research. While the center is a major benefit to students studying the environmental sciences, all students from all majors benefit from this magnificent facility. Our recognition as National Conservationist of the Year by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation created widespread visibility and niche building opportunities. It expanded our relationship with 11 regional environmental organizations and provided unmatchable opportunities for students wanting to study in coastal Virginia. About halfway through the 2-year process of constructing the Environmental Sciences Center, we entered discussions with the donor about an academic program that might complement the soon-to-be completed state-of-the-art facility. The donor suggested that an honors college with a focus on the environment in a location like ours would develop into a national niche program for the university. After 4 months of developing the model, the donor agreed to fund the program with annual contributions for the first 4 years. The Honors College opened in 2017, coinciding with the opening of the Environmental Sciences Center. The opening was greeted with tremendous success, 30,000 inquiries per year, incredibly high selectivity, and rave reviews from students, parents, and the media. By 2021, the success of the program had attracted much attention. The results were convincing. The original donor committed $23.2 million to start an endowment fund for the program. This past summer, the donor committed an additional $60 million to the Baton Honors College. Of the total given, $80.3 million was for the endowment. There were 3 conditions of the gift: gift anonymity. Number 2, $80.3 million for the endowment of the Honors College with a guarantee that the mission of the Honors College would focus on the environment. And number 3, that all endowment funds would be invested in an environmentally friendly way. Brown Advisory of Baltimore, Maryland, and a member of the Intentional Endowments Network agreed to invest our funds utilizing the network's checklist to align investment practices with institutional mission through sustainable investing. Shortly after investing the initial $80.3 million, our board voted unanimously to move the entirety of our endowment to Brown Advisory for environmentally friendly investing. So it's been 11 exciting months at Virginia Wesleyan as we work to put this aspect of our sustainability goals into practice. I'm delighted to have Allie Baylor from Brown Advisory with us today. She'll discuss some of the specifics of Brown's involvement and the VWU endowment profile. Allie?
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, everyone, I'm Allie Baylor. I'm a portfolio manager with Brown Advisory. And, you know, in reflecting on this panel, there were sort of 3 things that came up for me that I've heard the other speakers talk about as well, and that's commitment. I think, these are long-term transitions. A lot of work goes into being able to implement them credibly, and it's a journey. Brown Advisory spun out of Alex Brown in the late 90s, so has been investing for many decades, and its sustainability work is long as well, about 4 decades, really merging with a firm called Winslow Management in the 2011, which had 25 years of sustainable investing experience. And so I mentioned that history because, like Kate was saying earlier, it's really evolved, and we do a lot of bottoms up fundamental research ourselves as well on individual stocks and securities, as well as rigorous due diligence on external funds, and a lot of partnerships with the organizations that we all know have been leaders in sort of this movement in endowments. It was interesting. I was reading the Wall Street Journal on the way this morning, and there were 3 things in the paper that I thought were so critical. One, the news that Hertz had bought 200 or 600 or 65,000 EV, electric vehicles. Discussion of the Ukraine conflict and how that's really pushing the need for renewable energy adoption more quickly, as well as energy security. And then Starbucks news to really invest back in its employees. And so I think this is all consistent with our view at Brown Advisory, and I think where Virginia Wesleyan and our other panelists are, is that these are not only ways to align the endowment with the school's mission and values, but really to drive returns. So it's been a commitment, but we're really starting to see a lot of progress. The second thing I'll mention is the client focus, and then I'll pause before getting into the third component, because I think you'll lead us there, Lisa. But each, just like endowment investing, where you're really trying to think about the return and risk objectives of the individual institution and how you construct a portfolio to meet that school's operating needs, the values alignment has to consider that too. And so while Virginia Wesleyan espouses all elements of ESG, and we think it's all important to drive returns, the environment, as Dr. Miller was really talking about, is something that we're keeping at the forefront of our work as we start to do more and more with this portfolio, and thinking about not only transparency into what is in the portfolio, but also where we can make impact on sort of this critical value for the school.
Excellent. Thank you both. So again, this is a story. I would love it if Dr. Miller or Scott or Allie, if you could, again, just give us the snapshot of the timing, because I'm sort of fixated on timing, that the movement now we all have to do it, move quicker rather than having the luxury that we maybe had a couple decades ago.
Timing, it's
timing
also
of your work with Brown and your work with your portfolio.
Our work with Brown has been an 11-month experience, and I'll be candid with you that about a year and a half before we received the major gift, we had done an RFP to take a look at potential endowment managers. And so while Brown was not on the table at the time, they did show up on the radar. And when we made the determination after the major gift arrived, it was easier for us to pivot quicker to Brown because we had researched the landscape and knew Allie from her previous firm and had confidence in her abilities, and invited her to the table for the discussions, which created some confidence with our endowment committee of the board and with the board of trustees as a whole.
So Allie, when you got there, you took Wesleyan's environmental guiding principles, which are key to managing the endowment, and talk a little bit about how you used those and put those into practice.
Sure. And like I said, I think this last C is that it is a continuum. So commitment, client focus, and continuum. Just as the, previous colleagues previous panelists were talking about, I think transparency is really important. And so we are early in our relationship with Virginia Wesleyan. So it will be a journey, right? I mean, we will be working with the entire leadership team and the investment committee and making sure that the dialogue is robust about here are the investments we're making. This is what you own. This is how it aligns with these principles. And like the principles say, it's a learning institution. And so it will be a continuum. I mean, providing that information helps inform thoughtful decisions. And there, as we all know, there's a lot of greenwashing in the industry now. So we're not trying to say, here's a strategy that's labeled as ESG friendly. It's really looking deeper at that. We have a tool that we use that looks at the underlying holdings in our portfolio strategies, as well as has our external managers in there, and really helps us think, is this sort of something that's leaning into sustainability? Is it a core strategy that we want performance and is using ESG data that we're aware of? Or are there other kind of conflicts, and kind of continuing to look at that data and make informed decisions as a result? So,
Allie, let me add that, what made it move faster for us also, and I'll do my advertisement for IEN right now, is that when we did the environmental guiding principles, everything that we do on campus has the environment embedded into it. And, our donor for these projects, the major donor, follows all of our communications, is an emeritus member of our board, and reads, with tremendous attention, everything that we're doing. And so when the gift was made, she said, I noticed that Brown Advisory is involved in the Intentional Endowments Network. I know what that network stands for. I appreciate their guidelines on environmentally friendly investing. I would encourage you to take a look at them, because through my research, I found them to be first class. And so as we, evaluated our position, Brown Advisory's history with IEN, and I might add that I worked with George now back to 2006 when he and Tony first founded the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. I had credibility with them as a result of those interactive relationships, and I think that's important in building the relationship with our portfolio management as well.
So we're going to move in about a couple minutes to a full Q&A and bring back our other speakers. But if you could just take this last to talk about, like I asked the other others, what's next? Like, what are you looking forward to? I heard you, Allie, say a lot of collaboration and stakeholder and discussion and searching, but more in the goal setting. Like, what do you want to? What does Wesleyan want to accomplish next?
Well, the endowment is for the Baton Honors College, and what we have been able to do, we've entered students from our Baton Honors College in IEN's competition, so that the students are learning a little bit about investment along the way. It's our intent, as the relationship grows with Brown, to have more interactive participation with the full board, also with the students who are involved in the Honors College program. And I might add that we've had several other endowment contributions that have come our way since the major gift, with the specification also that it be added to the portfolio at Brown, because the donors who provided the funds knew that they would be handled in an environmentally friendly way. An added to this is that while the donor asked for anonymity, there was some bubbly around the community. Your endowment just doesn't grow by that much in that short a period of time without people knowing about it. Another donor came along shortly thereafter and said, I want to create an endowment for the senior capstone projects for the Baton Honors College. So every student graduates from the Baton Honors College has to do a capstone project that reflects on their education with us and its impact on the environment. Perfect. This donor decided to endow the competition. So what now happens, what will come from this endowment, is that the top 3 students will be called in front of a dinner, a banquet, a celebration of these capstone projects. And those 3 students will make a presentation, and a faculty panel will select the best one. And then with earnings off of this endowment for the symposium and prize, the students will receive a check to use towards their graduate studies, and they will also be able to, they'll receive a check to designate for the nonprofit the nonprofit environmental organization of their choice. So, that's an idea, we're using this to raise more money, and we're thrilled with the initial outcomes.
That's excellent. It's really good news when this kind of the defined investing attracts others to contribute because they want to be part of that movement.
And I'll just mention one other thing that I think is important, and that's the engagement part that we're able to have as asset managers with specific companies or specific funds. So, having the leadership of these institutions like we have on the panel allows us to go to managers and companies and say, this is the responsibility entrusted to us. Not only do we think, adopting strong ESG standards is valuable to the sustainability of the business or the manager, but we also, as asset owners, think it's important to us act in this way for our collective benefit as a society.
It's so powerful. Yep. Good. All right. Let's invite everybody back. And I'll start with the questions from that were in the chat. So one of them is, divestment from fossil fuels has been relatively easy to defend over the past 10 years as the energy sector underperformed. They say that changed over the past 12 months. What, if any, pushback from stakeholders has the panel seen now that from the energy sector? So who wants to take that first?
I can jump in, and I think it's a really great question. I saw it earlier, and as you think about, obviously what we've seen over the past few months, huge rebound in the energy sector. I think you roll it back 10 years, you're still operating at a deficit there. And I think you kind of have to take a step back and think about the next 10 years and what that looks like. And, as we think about a number of the traditional oil and gas companies committing to net zero by 2050, you have to know that those are organizations who are going to be spending a whole lot of money on renewables. You think about some of the fiscal green stimulus. Certainly, there's an additional impetus for Europe to find ways to be less reliant on other sources of traditional energy. And so I think, just as we're seeing some of that rebound, I think there remains some really interesting tailwinds for the renewable space in light of everything that we've seen.
Is anybody else, or I will go to that was a great answer, Kate, so we could go to the next question. All right, the next question. Outside of social responsibility, how would you encourage individuals to participate in environmental sustainable investment options, given that the growth may not currently be comparable, and what resources would you point to?
Yeah, I can jump in there because I think there's a lot in that question. And Lisa, I'm sure, you have thoughts on this as well, but I think unpacking the goals is really important of the individual, and the assumption of kind of the growth not being comparable. as Kate was just talking about, and as our previous question kind of alluded to, Keith, technology has really been an outperformer over the last decade, into the past year, and sustainable strategies lean a lot into that. So their performance has been phenomenal. I think going forward, there are some really great things about sustainable investing that will continue to drive returns, both thoughtful underwriting. We see our sustainable fixed income or sustainable strategies really just adding an element of due diligence that can protect on the downside. And then I think leaning into innovation, like the renewable energy. So I would say, I wouldn't, again, I think it comes to transparency, comparing strategies, understanding the differences. But I wouldn't make the assumption that you're having concessionary returns by aligning with your values. But again, it takes some work to really understand the data.
Well, speaking of returns, what are the metrics? Scott and Eric, if you could speak a little bit about the metrics that your universities have developed to set your intention and to measure success as you go forward.
Yeah, I can jump in there. So last year we had a student intern work with myself and Kate to try to develop a methodology to measure all of our fund managers on an ESG scale. The student developed pretty much from whole cloth. He developed based on a survey that we'd sent to all our fund managers and all the responses that we got. And we had a 100% response rate, which was quite encouraging. He looked at those qualitative answers and developed a framework to put those qualitative answers into a quantitative figure for each of the fund managers across a whole variety of facets of their responses. And so we use that to help us really, scale our fund managers into the slots. Which are the really good, well-performing ones with respect to ESG, and which ones really just said, no, we aren't interested. So it really gave us an insight, another insight that we hadn't previously had into our fund manager lineup to help us see, okay, so who do we really need to keep track of and maybe work a little harder with? And who do we know is performing well? And when we run this again, how will they have changed? What will, along what lines of assessment will they have changed? And are they increasing? Are they decreasing? So that's something that we've done here.
It's wonderful that you included a student.
Yeah, we were very fortunate
to
have a really, really top-notch student who was a dual major in sustainability and data analytics.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would say on that question, check back with me in a year.
Okay.
We're still bubbling with excitement over the contribution and the impact that it's had. And I will say that as a result of this, other donors have stepped up to the plate, and that's probably my favorite metric is additional donors. So we're still in the honeymoon period. Something tipped me on this earlier. I did this presentation at ACE about a month ago, and the question that came out was, this seems like a fairy tale story. Surely you had some kind of bump along the way. Really, there hasn't been a bump. IEN's role was important to our donor and to the institution. Having confidence in Allie and her colleagues at Brown was terrific. The most interesting aspect is that my board chair had made his money as a businessman before retiring a couple of years ago after selling his company in the fossil fuel business. So doing something of this variety at a time when the board chair had just sold his fossil fuel company, per se, was the only challenge that we had. And the campus community greeted us with excitement and has embraced it. And my forward thinking on this is, we want to take students who are interested in investing and interested in what IEN preaches and have them learn from the folks at Brown Advisory so that they're positioned when they go out into the workforce, whether it's managing endowments or in the wealth management side of their operation.
Well, your board chair made the decision to divest as well.
And believe me, we appreciate that.
Allie and Kate, if you could maybe give us an example of one of the more higher impact investments that you are that you have brought to these endowments, loan funds or within just how beyond the SRI and the ESG, but the higher impact. What have you brought?
Sure. I'll talk about a specific company real quickly because I think that makes it seem real. Yeah. Enphase Energy is a company that provides technology to advance solar energy, and it is a capital intensive business. So for a while it was overlooked, but the fact that, and this is where we're really trying to uncover investments that drive both return because we can invest in them at an attractive price, but they are adopting, advancing sort of ESG principles. And so 100% of their revenues are derived from facilitating the transition to clean energy. And so I think that goes to show sort of the rigor that goes into the process of finding attractive investments that have long-term price appreciation capabilities, but also that are working towards sort of the values of a school like Virginia Wesleyan's.
Nice. Kate?
Yeah, so one of the things that Eric and I have talked about in previous panels is an investment that the University of New Hampshire made with our local CDFI, Community Development Finance Institution, the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, alongside a handful of other clients who've made investments and been part of that loan program that effectively, creates affordable housing here in New Hampshire, helps to support both financially, but also with some expertise, some of the local businesses, has had a huge hand in kind of some of the diverse communities of groups that are coming into our cities and helping them to establish businesses. So we feel like that's one of those instances where, there was some additional kind of cash fixed income room in the portfolio, and we're able to earn effectively a market rate on that while doing a huge amount of kind of local or place-based impact.
Nice. It's local is always feels really good. Scott and Eric, if you could just talk a little bit about the mission, your mission, and aligning your mission, your investments with your mission. Like, do you talk about that when you're talking with other? Is it part of the university sort of attraction now?
Eric, why don't I let you lead since I've done a lot of talking?
Okay. All right. Sure. Well, UNH sustainability is really in the DNA here. It's been in our DNA for many years. We've had our Sustainability Institute in place for 25 years now. Really a major focus for decades of sustainability. Frankly, the investments are sort of one of the last corners of the university come along in this area. So we're really proud to have finally done that. One of the things we're working on right now is really trying to bolster the language that we're using around sustainability in our investment policy statement. So we've been having some conversations at the investment committee level about that. And we are, we're really making that, quite secure in our investment policy statement, and looking forward to getting that language approved in the very near future. So, there's really a recognition now that I would say has really developed through important conversations over the last year and a half or so to really fully align the investments with the university's larger mission.
I'll add, this was easier for us because of the environmental guiding principles. So we're located in coastal Virginia, not far from the Atlantic Ocean and really close to the Chesapeake Bay. We're in the Elizabeth River watershed. I have 8 donors who have been actively involved in 11 environmental organizations that are within 20 minutes of our campus. So, selling a 36-member board on going to environmentally friendly investing was not a particularly difficult task. And the fact that it supported a program, Baton Honors College, out of 30,000 people, out of 30,000 prospective students every year, 40 are offered scholarships. So we have 160 total students that are the best and the brightest from everywhere in the world. Who could argue with a program like that that has one of the largest honors college endowments in the country, and that endowment is exclusively invested in an environmentally friendly way is a win-win-win all the way around. And to have wonderful partners at IEN and also at Brown Advisory, it's 3 organizations that are synergistically working together for a common good. And I'll close quickly by making my pitch for IEN. There are 60 higher educational institutions that are members of IEN right now, somewhere around that. I encourage others to get involved also.
Well, maybe each 60 has to go recruit one more.
There you go.
All right. So one final 1-sentence piece of advice for your fellow presidents, finance directors, board members, others, that to learn from what you've learned in the past 10 months or 10 years on this journey towards mission-aligned investing.
I'll jump in here and then I'll throw it to Kate and to Ali. And they can talk more specifically if they wanted to about what I'm about to say. But, the information that we're dealing with is incomplete. The solutions are rapidly evolving, but just keep pushing forward anyway. Do it with prudence, of course, but just keep pushing forward, right? And look for the solutions. Frankly, several years ago, one could honestly say that the track record of ESG investments maybe wasn't long enough to really stand up, put next to all the other investments. But yeah, 5-7 years down the road, there's a really legitimate track record going on now with ESG investments. I think it's pretty clear that they perform as well, if not better in many cases, than other investments. So keep pushing forward.
All right,
Yeah.
Kate.
And building on that, take away the ESG, there are no absolutes in the investment industry, right? We're all working with the best information we have. And I guess to sum it up succinctly, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Every step really makes a difference.
Right. Ali?
Yeah, I was similarly, I think progress is we're all trying to be good stewards of capital for our donors and for our clients and for the community. But I think collaboration is the thing I'd add on that. So things like IEN, being able to partner with other, finance professionals like Kate, understanding what other schools are doing. I mean, that network, this is all, we're kind of all on the same team here.
Well, if I can say, my advice would be invest in the world you want to see in the companies that are creating that, because if you don't, we won't have a world to see. And it's fun and it's exciting. And all of you have, just said, that's where you get more donors. That's where you get more impact. And I don't believe that there are any concessionary returns. So I don't think you have to take them. So I'm going to pass it back. And just thank you all. It's been a wonderful panel, and I loved doing, the university and the investment advisor because, as I believe, investment advisors, we will move money quicker to impact and to creating the world we want to see with their help.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our fantastic speakers, especially for going with the flow as we learn this new technology, and to all of our participants for joining us, and also to our sponsors, host institutions, and nonprofit partners for making this event possible. And one just closing reminder as well, I want to make sure that you are all aware of the last session of the day happening at 5 o'clock Eastern. On the impact and intersectionality of digital currencies. And then, as George mentioned in the chat, we have a few endowment, more topically focused sessions tomorrow. One is on taking the first step on the road to a net zero endowment. And we also have a keynote on how these sustainable investing options can be integrated into retirement plans. So we hope that you'll join us for those sessions tomorrow and many more over the next couple of days. And thank you again so much to everyone for joining.